All right, we're live. Happy Friday, everybody. Today we are talking about the messy middle ground of growth. So I'm going to start our intro and then we will get started. Awesome. Well, we're back. Okay, so our guest, Mr. Matt, how about you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Name is Matt DiGeronimo from New Jersey. Shortly after high school, I enlisted in the United States Navy and was on nuclear submarines as an electronics technician. Navy said, "Hey, we'll send you to school, come back as an officer." I did that. 20 some years later, I retired as a commander. And I did, I don't know, 6 or 7 overseas deployments, including 2 years in the Middle East, not on submarines, just boots on the ground. And then once I retired, I'm still in the process of figuring out what I want to be when I grow up. So in the interim, while I'm waiting for the Yankees to call me to be their next shortstop, I'm an executive for an electrical engineering company called Shermco. And in my spare time, I enjoy reading and writing. So I've written 7 books. Not here to promote them, but I think one of them will play well to this topic. It's a book called Suck.
Nice. I like that title.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Well, we've got Nick and we've got Dr. Gilly. Nick, how's it going?
Yes, great. Yeah, had a good week. Busy. I'm doing a fresher weekend, looking forward to it. So yeah, all going well.
Sweet. Dr. Gilly, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there. I've had an interesting past 2 weeks. Not busy. I guess just there have been like a lot of illnesses. But yeah, beyond that, I'm good. I'm happy to see you guys and happy to be here today.
Awesome. Love that.
Very much.
I'm good. I got back from Arizona really late Tuesday night. It was a beautiful 80, 90 degree weather. And then I came back to the 20s. It was a very intense shock to my system. But no, I spoke last week at a $1 Million Mingle event, and it was just great to connect with people in one of my coaching communities that I'm a part of, as well as new faces. And we even got to watch a polo event, which was very interesting because I've never done polo before. So that meant the fancy hats and all those types of situations. It was very Pretty Woman-ish. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, but no, I'm good. So let's kick off our topic. Matt, this is a topic that seems near and dear to you as far as that messy middle. So tell us a little bit about what does the messy middle mean?
So I kind of look at it from 2 perspectives, and I'll give the highlights of both of those perspectives. So the first one, the seed was planted in my head after I was divorced 8 years ago or so, and that could be a challenging transition for anyone, right? And I was reflecting, and I either read it or thought of it, who knows, but I had this thought in my head that as I was looking for another person to spend time with, stop looking for Mrs. Right and start being Mr. Right? So instead of seeking the things that we want, become the person who will naturally attract those things. And I wrote a book called Actualization on that topic, right? So when we get dissatisfied, or at least I should only speak for myself, when I felt dissatisfied with my life, I felt I've been freed a bit by that thought of well, your goals are great, but you might not be ready for your goals, right? The universe tends to take care of us and provide us things when we're ready for it. So instead of lamenting, even my own mental health, instead of lamenting the shoulds around everything, like this shouldn't be happening, this should be happening instead, it's like, well, get rid of the word should, because it's a poisonous word, and in my opinion, it negatively impacts our viewpoint of the world and our mental health. And then the second part is that suck part, right? So in the Navy, we had a term called embrace the suck. And it was just this idea of like, look, you're on a submarine, you're on a tin can with 150 people for 6 months. It's going to suck sometimes, and just embrace it. Like, suck has a seat on the bus, and you can either make fun of it, or you can lament its presence for the rest of your life. And I extrapolate that metaphor to anything that we do, especially if it's new. We're going to suck at it. That's just the way it is. And I see a lot of people, my children, my peers, people in my life, who get very frustrated when they could try meditation. You're going to suck at it. That's okay. It's like the mustard bottle that you take out of the refrigerator and you squeeze and you get all that like watery stuff comes out. That's the suck. And the only way through it is through it. Like, just keep going through it. And those are two mechanisms. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but I've had significant mental health challenges throughout my life, really. And it wasn't until about the mid part of my life where I realized their existence. And those are two things that really have substantially changed my mental health for the better.
Yeah. I love that phrase, embrace the suck. I've heard that before. And it's interesting how you can meet certain people and you can tell that they're embracing the suck, and then you can meet other people and you can tell they're wallowing in the suck. So I like that. Nick, do you have anything as far as for you what that messy middle means to you?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely resonates with me. I think I've heard a lot of people say about my sister who works mental health has said that when she used to coach people when she worked mental health, she'd say, to try and get them to stop saying shoulda, woulda, coulda. What you should do is setting an expectation, and woulda, coulda is like looking regret to would have or could have, And I think that's, it's about thing is something we're all guilty of doing. And I've wondered there's something around also sort of, expectations, or whether we in society, we have a lot of pressure expectations. And I think perhaps social media plays some part in, we should be doing more of this, or living this way, or having this lifestyle, earning this much. And so whether like you say, whether we are always having that, trying to, be all about where we should be, because of sort of expectations compared to other people. I think social media can make it worse. And that stops, like you said, I think living in the moment and actually, embracing the life you have, which is good and bad. That's a life, isn't it? It has to suck, but it also has the good parts too, I guess. So yeah, it definitely resonates with me.
How about you, Dr. Gilly?
Yeah, I mean, this just, reminds me a lot of the type of therapy that I like to use a lot. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And there's a lot more kind of treatment modalities that are more guided by Eastern philosophies that are more about mindfulness and acceptance. And there's a metaphor I use with probably all my clients to reflect exactly what you said, Matt. And it's called the unwanted party guest metaphor. You guys can look it up, right? In YouTube, type in like unwanted party guest act Russ Harris, if you want to get even more detailed. And it's kind of a silly cartoon, but the idea behind the metaphor is that uncomfortable thoughts and feelings are like an unwanted party guest. But the problem is that if you focus on trying to kick out, we call him Brian because that's his name in the video. It would suck though if I had a client It would suck though if I had a client named Brian. I'd have to change the name of the neighbor. Yeah, because he's a neighbor. But, the idea is that if your focus is on trying to get Brian to leave your party or trying to, control him, then you're missing out on life. And it's also going to backfire, because when you try to not feel anxious, then typically you just feel more anxious, because that's something your body is just naturally designed to do. It would be unhelpful to completely get rid of anxiety. And it's similar with like sleep, for example. Like if you try really, really hard to fall asleep, so much so to the point that you're stressing out over the fact that you're not asleep yet, it's going to backfire, because that's something that your body just naturally does. It sleeps. And so it's similar with thoughts and feelings. So I'm constantly reminding, for some people, it's really, really hard to wrap their head around that, because, they keep coming back to, I just can't control these thoughts. I'm like, that's not the goal, right? The goal is just to let them be there, right? They have a seat at the table. They're allowed at the party, and you keep moving on, through your life. In some circumstances, people are really, really significantly struggling, and it's hard. But, if you practice consistently and there are specific strategies to do that, then it becomes a lot easier. It's like a weight is lifted, when you learn to let go of control.
Yeah. I know when I did my coaching certification, she had always talked about don't should on yourself, right? Because when we should on ourselves, it's more so it puts us into the guilt and the shame spiral, where then you feel even more crappy about yourself. And it continues this downward trajectory. We did have a question come up as far as, would embracing the suck be adjacent to owning one's circumstances? And somebody can weigh in. Matt, if you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think owning one's circumstances, but I would caveat that, because I'll give you an example. My 7-year-old son, he was playing a basketball game, and I was talking to him about how he did, and something came up, and he said, well, it's not my fault. And I stopped the car and I pulled over and I said, look, Hunter, I never want to hear you say that, right? Because our life is our life, right? We're not assigning blame. So owning one's circumstances, I think, sounds like owning our choices, which result in our life. And I believe that to be true. But I also believe what Dr. Gilly said is that there's an unwanted party guest. I didn't invite them. Like, I'm not responsible for the existence of that party guest. Like, I'm not responsible for the weather, but I have to figure out a way to live with it. So maybe that's a longer answer to the question, but I think it's fair to say they're adjacent thoughts.
Okay, awesome. So how do you handle the frustration that comes with either that slow progression in that messy middle? Whoever wants to go first, it doesn't matter.
Well, I think one thing is, we all, there's a lot of talk about resilience, and I think some people see that as being resilient, could possibly be avoiding the hard bits, and to build resilience is avoiding the hard bits in life. But I think to be true resilience is actually, it's embracing the hard bits, and being able to sort of take the ebb and flow of life, embrace them, acknowledge them, and sort of deal with them, and then move on. I think that's sort of true resilience. But I think it's there's almost, in some ways, perhaps, our culture can be to avoid, if we can avoid the stresses, how can we avoid the hard bits in life, but I think it's, part of our growing is actually, to embrace those as that's what makes us grow as a person. So that's true resilience.
And I would add to that, I think two things. So one is when we feel that messy middle ground and we get frustrated, I've learned to shrink my time horizon because usually I'm thinking about something that may or may not happen. Right? Mark Twain said, I've lived through some horrible things in my life and a handful of them actually happened. Right. So, like, let's not live through something that we don't need to live through. And if you can't find peace thinking about the next week, then think about the next day. And if you can't find peace there, then think about the next hour. So, to me, that's always been an effective coping mechanism. And the other thing that I think is important to mention is I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by what they perceive to be the challenge in front of them, right? So, for example, let's say you really want to be an author, you just can't seem to get your stuff together, and you lament the fact that you can't get this done and you can't grow into the person that you want to. I think it's because people, let's say on a scale of 0 to 100, they're at like maybe say an 11. And then they look up at 100 and say, well, that's where I want to be. And then they get frustrated because you can't get from 11 to 100. You got to get to 12. Right? So just baby steps, right? And you'll get there. And usually to me, I get frustrated when I'm overwhelmed at what I think my own expectations of myself are. And so it's easy for most of us to think about the end state too much instead of just saying, what is my next step? Even if it's a tiny one, right? Like whatever it is, write one word a day. Like make it so simple that you couldn't not do it. And then what I've learned is that in time, you just have to be, if you can write a sentence a day, after a year, you have your book, right? And I think that can apply to not just writing, but, pretty much everything in our lives.
Is there a skill around sort of patience? Is that something you developed, patience? Because it's a skill, isn't it? And I think we want to have it all now. It's being sort of impatient to acknowledge that things do take time. Like you say, there's a series of steps, and you have to go through steps 1 to 10 to get to 11. Is that a skill you developed over time? Or
yeah, because quite frankly, I think like John Lennon said, life is what happens when we're busy making other plans. So, like, to me, the real freedom is enjoying the process. Like, if you're not enjoying the process, I don't know if how well you're set up to succeed, because I've been there where I'm so focused on the end state, whether it was in the military or post-military, that when you get there, it's a little disappointing because you say, well, that's it. Yeah, I didn't really feel like I thought it was going to feel. Whereas if I can learn to really embrace and enjoy the process, and that kind of goes back to my thing about don't look for Mrs. Right, become Mr. Right. Like, just like, I'm a writer, for example, and writers write. Like, the fact that there may be a book at the end of it is a footnote. Like, I'm a writer, so I write, and I'm not going to get frustrated about things out of my control. I've been rejected by more agents than I can count. And, I try not to take that personally, and I just keep plugging away and just shrink my time horizon. And it all sounds very simple, but for me, especially with some mental health issues, these are things that have taken me decades to fully understand. And it's amazing how simple some of this stuff is.
I think often the answers are the simplest, but they're the hardest in some ways to put into practice. But it's often the way, isn't it?
Dr. Gilly, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking it's helpful also to think about, why am I doing this? Like, why is this important to me? And identifying that, like the value behind your goals. That can help also in focusing on and appreciating the journey rather than just wanting to get to the destination, and celebrating small wins too. And they're not even small, like, I think even you brought up the example of the agent, like, even having one person consider you or read your manuscript, like that's something within itself. So I think sometimes, we, like you said, we can hold ourselves to such high standards, and those wins are still legitimate, and they still serve whatever's important to you. So like if it's creativity, like for example, I just had my first book released, and I feel like I'm in limbo now because I'm like, well, what's next? And I'm going to my first like writers group meeting tomorrow. I just found it online, but that was values driven. I was like, well, what am I trying to find here? And I was like, but like, what would I find fun and fulfilling? And I was like, getting involved in the writing community. So that's a step, and that's a win, and that's exciting. So, you create excitement and value in your life. And it doesn't have to be the actual, book publication, or it could be, like maybe you'll get there one day, but it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah. I like how you said, like celebrating the small wins. I think that as a lot of us here as entrepreneurs, business owners, I mean, even if we aren't those things, I think we forget to celebrate the small wins and the small things that we do every single day, because we often feel like we just need to keep piling on the busy and go until we're exhausted. And then it's like, well, I didn't get my checklist done today, so I suck, right? Because it's this mental game that we play with ourselves, and we shoulda all over ourselves as well. So it's really finding those tiny, minute things that we can celebrate every single day. Hey, you got out of bed today. That's a win, because you're still breathing on this side of the dirt. So it's finding those small things, like you said, Dr. Gilly, to celebrate. And I think that also can help get you through that frustration. There was somebody that I had talked to not long ago, and she talked about vitamin G, and the G stands for gratitude.
That's so cheesy. Okay.
I know, right? It was so cheesy, but I was like, that is genius, right? And just changing that into the gratitude of every single day. Something that I have my clients do is journal. And I have a few clients that absolutely hate to journal, right? So every time we have a conversation, I'm like, you should really journal that out. And they're like, it's gross. But it's one of those things that they find once they journal out what they're thinking in their head. If they haven't quite figured out how to verbalize it, they can write those frustrations down on the paper, and they can release some of the crap that's building up within them. And even though they're having resistance to it, then we tap into, why are you resistant to it? What has happened for you in the past that makes you not like to journal now, right? And it's not even so much about, I have one friend who I talked to about journal. She's like, my hand cramps. I'm like, that's because you're gripping everything to control it so tight. I'm like, just release all of the tension and the stress onto the paper. And she's like, I didn't think of it that way. So it's those small things that even from the outside looking in, that somebody can pick up where you might not be recognizing things in your life. So it's that additional accountability, I think, as well, that can help get through those frustrating moments, and to also know you're not alone. Like, so many of us have experienced the same things or similar things and have those as part of our story as well. But we feel like we need to keep it hidden within and feel so isolated. When in reality, when you tell people your story, they're like, wait a minute, that sounds very similar to my story. And then it just kind of connects. And yeah. have you ever felt like you wanted to quit mid-process? Go ahead.
100%.
You're shaking your head.
100%. Yeah, because I think someone said it, but I forget who. Like, our mindset is largely about expectations, and when I try to reflect on what is the root cause of some, whether you call it the mental health challenge that I think is growing in our country. I can't help to go back, and I'm not going to go into social media at all, but I just think of this our education process, right? And I'm going to get back to the quitting, but I just follow me for a second. The whole system is designed for you to show up, they give you the syllabus, you do the things on there, you get a good grade. There's not a lot of uncertainty, right? You go to the next, if you're in algebra 1, algebra 2 comes next. Imagine running a school like life, where you can go into any classroom you want. You could sit there for 2 days, 2 years. Sometimes you get grades that are horrible, even though your work is good. Like, it's like an Alice in Wonderland type school is much more fitting to real world life than this artificial environment. And I think, I was a very good student. I took school very seriously, and I think it like warped my mindset to the real world of like, well, hold on, wait a minute. It's very black and white, right? Like, if I do this, I should get this, right? The Albert Ellis will not shit on myself is what I was. And I really trace it back to education in some respects, because the way and so of course I want to quit, because it gets frustrating, because it's not consistent with the whole process of how I grew up. So having to unlearn and recognize that there is no such thing as success without getting knocked down and punched in the face over and again. Like, when we watch movies, yeah, Rocky beats the bad guy at the end, but it was only an hour and a half long. So you didn't get to see the 150 days of him waking up at 4:00 in the morning, hating his life, slugging it out, having bad days, etc. So our expectations get wonky. And so, yeah, of course we quit because we think too early, hey, I can't do this. And above my desk, I have that picture. I think you guys have probably seen it, of a miner who's chopping away at the wall, and they show all the jewels right as he quit. Right, he's probably one swing away from that. And but on the other hand, I do think there is a time to throw in the towel. Right, like if it's not aligned with your purpose and your values, then maybe you do have to reconsider it. And I think that's a very individual choice for all of us.
Anybody else?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking how I think some people think perhaps that if you did one thing, then one goal, then that's it. Then made it. So if I just publish this one book, I'll be happy. If I write this one book, or if I get this one job, or get this one promotion, this one thing, and then I've done it, I've got it, I'm happy. But of course, when you write one book, you want to write another book, or when you reach that amount of money, you want to earn more money. And you never get you'll never get to a point where you say, that's it, I've made it, I'm happy, I don't need to. You always will then obviously need for, what do I do next? So I think there is never really one point where one goal where you get that and that's it, I've done it, I've achieved everything. I think life is, like you said, it's a process, and whatever your goal is, there'll always be another goal. There'll always be something else you want to do, and that's the way we grow, by constantly thinking, what's next? What do I want to do now? Written my first book. What's next on my, do I want to achieve or do? So it's never ever going to be one thing that we'll do and then that's it. We've done it. So I think it's partly it goes back to seeing life as a process. It's never one big goal. It's always just a series of achieving one goal and then setting the next goal.
But hey, Nick, can I ask you a question? So do you think happiness should be a goal?
No, I mean, happiness is a state, definitely. I I suppose it's just more of a more in the sense that we all. I mean, I guess like you probably had a goal to write your book, but then like you said, if you probably probably maybe write another book. So I guess it's more not necessarily goals aren't yet. It happens as a state, not a goal. But I guess it's just more of a way of looking in the way of how we more about how we live in a wider way of how we will live our life, because it happens as a state, but how we achieve that state, there's a million ways of how we all live our lives and what happiness means to us.
Do you think that, I mean, for anyone here, do you think that there are maybe too many people who think that, hey, if I'm happy, then I'm doing life right? Because to me, and Doctor, you can weigh in if I'm getting the science wrong here, but happiness is a dopamine hit, and I don't think we're here on this planet to excrete a chemical in our brains. Like that's not. It kind of goes back to what we're saying, like purpose. Like why am I here? What do I value? And I've certainly enjoyed happiness along the way, but I've learned never to seek out happiness as a goal. Because it's like Nick said, it's a temporary state. Don't get me wrong, I certainly do from time to time make decisions that are going to give me that dopamine. I'm a fallible human being, but I don't think, at least I have learned to let go of that as a goal, right? Like I'm not trying to be happy. I'm trying to become congruent between my mind, body, and soul, and take that congruence towards my purpose or my vision, and noting that there's going to be storms in there that are not going to make me happy, and there's going to be sunshine, but that's kind of an aside from what I'm trying to achieve. I mean, any thoughts on that? It's certainly not scientific by any means.
No, well, and I think, like you said, happiness is fleeting, right? It's an emotion. But for me, from a faith standpoint for myself, right, it's joy. Can you find joy even when stuff is going wrong or you're in that frustrated moment? Because again, nobody can take that from you. But it's a matter of, are you giving it away and letting other people control how joyful you are, right? Because joy and happiness are two very different things. Very different things.
How would you describe that? Because I don't know if I follow. Why are they two different things?
So, like happiness, like you said, it's that emotion. It's that hit. It's that all of a sudden, like happy is everything's going great, you're happy, right? But can you find true joy when your bank account, say, is in the red? And it's like, yeah, that's there, but we're going to get through it. And almost having that hope and that belief that everything is going to work out. And it, like, joy comes from within, a deep sense of almost like gratitude as well. Like optimism, yes, faith, belief, but like joy is deep in your soul. Whereas happiness is more surface level.
That makes sense. Thanks for explaining it. I like that.
And I don't know if that's necessarily a great explanation, but that's the best I could come up with in the moment.
That's good.
But for me, it's like, again, that happiness is very fleeting. But you can also, if you're letting circumstances or others like have an impact on how joyful you feel, and almost like you're giving them the control, like they're stealing your joy, right? But it's not for them to really steal. So are you truly in control of your joyfulness? Or are you looking at it as more of like that surface level happiness, right? So if I'm truly joyful, no matter what my children are doing, they can't steal my joy, right? But if I'm like happy, that surface level, and they do something and I allow what they're doing to affect me, I'm letting them take that and I'm giving that control away. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a ton of sense.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I am making sense. But to me, it's like, okay, when you're in those frustrated moments, I've had those moments of complete and utter frustration in my marriage, in my parenting, in my mental health, in business ownership, where like all the things are going wrong, right? And it's like, I want to quit. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. But then it's like, have the short interim pity party and you dust yourself off and it's okay. How can we go about this with a clear view and a different vantage point to find out, okay, that didn't work. So what do we do now? Right? And they often say, what? The faster you fail, the faster you'll succeed. So how quickly can you get to failure, even when things are in that frustrated point, right? Set yourself a time limit of, okay, I'm going to have my pity party for 3 hours today. I'm going to binge watch Netflix or Hulu or whatever. And then I'm going to dust myself off and I'm going to get back on the horse. But often I think so many of us can get stuck in that pity party where then we allow ourselves to continue to wallow in it. And then you find yourself really battling and guilting and shaming yourself, where then you have a harder time to get out of it. And then you're really thinking of that surface level emotion, right? Well, this doesn't make me happy. Well, if you truly have joy, then it doesn't matter what the circumstance is. You get up and you keep going.
It sort of, to my eyes, it sort of goes back to the why, because if you are living and, having moments of stress, moments of doubt, you have some happy moments, life's up and downs, it's challenging. But if you know that you are doing the right thing because, you know why you're doing it and it's something you got a purpose, you believe that I'm doing this for these reasons, they mean a lot to me, and this is why, that why is strong, then everything will be, you'll know that whatever, the good and the bad, it's part of, part of the journey. But as long as you've got that strong why to keep you, I guess, focused and keep you going through the ups and the downs and the ups. I guess it goes back to what you said. The why is everything, isn't it? Really, why do you do anything? Why is the motivations, and it's that the drive, I guess, that keeps you with the decisions you make.
Yeah, I think it's a great motivational strategy too, to remind yourself why. Like if, I know definitely in graduate school, because I did a master's degree first before doing my PhD, and I had my daughter while I was in my PhD program. So I was in graduate school for a while. And toward the end, it was dragging on, and I really needed to lean into the, why am I doing this? And thinking about, you mentioned like what was it? Like someone who was using an axe and there were jewels right on the other side. That's how it felt for sure. Just wanted to give up.
Okay, let's see. I have a couple more questions. We're at 2:40 already. Well, that's Central Time anyway. Let's see. What mindset shifts helped you navigate the in-between season?
I have one. So I reflected on my time in the Navy, and we would always have pre-planned responses for pretty much everything, right? There was no, like we used to say, like we shouldn't get our butts kicked by something that we can predict, right? There'll always be things that we can't. And I don't know what took me so long, but I started to think about that in my own life and identifying my triggers. So, for example, I get triggered when I feel disrespected, whether it's a stranger or someone close to me. So in my natural state, I can have joy, walk into a convenience store, have the cashier be really rude to me, and then I walk out in a bad mood. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Ashley. Like, I don't own my own joy. I don't own my own emotions. Well, a cashier being rude to me shouldn't surprise me. Like, that's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So, taking some time to recognize, like, okay, here are 5 triggers for me. What am I going to do when it happens next? Now, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? So you could say whatever you want to say, and you'll get some version of that. But what I've experienced is that it helps. It's like, okay, I've prepared for this. Like, I've gone through this practice in my head. This is happening in real world right now. What did I say I was going to do? And whether I do that or not, because I'm a fallible human being, is a question mark. But that mind shift has really helped me navigate, because really the times I get triggered to certain places mentally that can be dangerous for me are very well known. I know them. So in every other element of my life, I prepare for the things that, like, I don't send my son out without warm clothes if they say it's going to be cold today. I just don't. It's a pre-planned response. But yet I allow myself to get bumped around like a ping pong ball in life with my emotions, instead of having a plan for the things that I can predict.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's something around, knowing yourself and being honest about yourself, so knowing, we all have our own different triggers. So, someone disrespecting you in that situation was someone else that may not trigger them in any way. I mean, knowing what triggers you as a person, or in my case, what triggers me, but, knowing what your strengths are, knowing your weaknesses. I think the more you know yourself and are honest about, who you are, because some ways there's no point trying to, do something, make the decisions. You should obviously be trying to play with your strengths as who you are as a person. And we all have strengths, things we're good at, things we're not good at, things I don't know, we think that we have different triggers. And I guess it's understanding ourselves so that decisions we make will be the right ones for us, I think. And yeah, I think there's something around and understanding ourselves and awareness of ourselves in a really honest way. Because I think, for me, I went through a stage of trying to do certain things, achieve certain things, and it wasn't right for me as a person. It wasn't who I, didn't fit to my strengths and my wants and my why, and so I've sort of shifted that, and I think it started with being honest about I think we're all unique in that way.
And can I add something to that real quick? I think one mind shift that I've had, and I think it just comes maybe with age, is that I extend a lot more grace to people in my life, even strangers, than I used to, because I remind myself, like, I have no idea what this person was going through, right? Like the person who was just mean to me, they may have just gone through a breakup. Maybe they just declared bankruptcy. Maybe they lost a loved one. And here I am upset because they didn't say hello. Like, so that's helped me. And then kind of along with that, I've developed this almost ability to envision what people look like when they were a toddler or like a 7-year-old, and just remind myself that we were all there, right? So and I wouldn't get upset at a 7-year-old over this stuff. So it's like, it's just a reminder. It connects me to humanity a little bit more, to when I see someone, even if they're doing something that bothers me, like trying to imagine not only what they might be going through and giving them some grace for that, but a reminder that, we all used to wear diapers, right? So like we're none of us are that special in terms of like giving them the power over me or shitting on them. Like, well, why? Because we're all just fallible human beings. And again, I don't think any of this is Nobel Peace Prize worthy, but it took me decades to figure this stuff out.
It's interesting. I noticed when you go to a shop, the shop staff will always have in supermarkets, a name badge with a name on it. And but no, most people in the public won't obviously say their name. So whenever I go in the shop, I always say, if I'm obviously member to do it, always make an effort to say, oh, thanks, Helen, and then there's always a moment of shock, surprise, I think it's an automatic thing of having in my name, and then they realize, of course, their name's badge there. But it's that, and that simple thing of thanking them, but also using a name, a name badge, it always catch them unawares. They don't expect it, because obviously 90% of people don't thank them and use the names on the name badge. So I think it's like you said, those little things can have a big effect, and then it's like a ripple effect as well.
Yeah, I found the same thing to be helpful, Matt, for me too. And the example I think of, it probably started in college, because I started studying psychology in college, and also I was just interested in mental health from a younger age. And so just learning, about other people's experiences. And I think it's kind of developing empathy or a different kind of view. I think it's easier with people you don't know. So when I was in college, I was eating lunch with my boyfriend, now husband, and he's very defensive, and his guard would go up kind of more easily, because I think it's similar, like in that the trigger for him is disrespect. And so I was taking my tray with food after we ate, and I was going to dump it in like the dumpster, or the trash can. And there was another man who came by and kind of knocked his food into me. So some of the garbage fell on my foot. And so my husband got upset, and he was like, hey, like you just dropped garbage on my girlfriend. And so later I said to him, his wife could have just died. And you would have just made his day worse. And God forbid, that happened. But it goes back to, you never know. For me, it's harder when I know the person well, and then they still continuously do things that are not kind. But yeah, I think that it's a skill that's helpful when it's a stranger, when it's someone you don't know, because it's true. You don't know what's going on in someone's life. I think it's true also for the people you do know. Like, you don't know what's going on in anyone's life. At the end of the day, though, we're all human, and we all just want to be loved, accepted, and respected. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with feeling bitter or whatever emotion you're feeling. It's just a matter of, well, how would you feel proud of yourself, right? How do you want to conduct yourself? And sometimes you're going to make mistakes. People have different ability levels in terms of being able to control themselves. But if it's someone you can repair. So it's just a question of, living or behaving in a way that would make you feel proud of yourself as a human being.
That's interesting. It reminds me of something that I tell myself, that I'm not the general manager of the world, right? Like, I don't have to fix people. I don't have to fix things. I'm responsible for me and no one else, right? So this idea of, like, especially the people that we're close with, like even my own son, like he's his own person. My wife she's her own person. And efforts that I have to change people have never played successfully for me or anyone that I was in my life. So just relinquishing that control and saying, like, okay, I can influence things in a positive way, but let's give more than we take, and let's stop trying to should on other people or to change who they are, because it's not our role. I'm not the general manager of the world. I get enough to take care of with just myself, and there's a freedom in that.
I guess it is something around being a role model, not like as in I want to be a role model, but I guess if the best way to influence other people just by being someone who has good values, who has who lives life in a positive way, who has a good outlook, who's nice to other people, all these things. And if you have all those aspects to who you are as a person, and your personality and the way you live your life, and you're a good role model, then I guess you'll influence people, hopefully, by people thinking you know, I'm nice chat with Matt the other day. What great guy. He was. I love what he said about that. I love, just people will I guess that's one of the best things to do is to be a role model. And obviously children is the obvious way, but I think just generally to anyone you come in contact with, isn't it? If we can inspire and influence other people just by being who we are and the way we live our life and our values and the way we behave, then that's one of the best ways, isn't it, to influence other people.
That reminds me of a Mark Twain quote who said, "What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear a word you're saying." Right? Like at the end of the day, it's what we do. We are what we do, not what we think and not what we say.
The phrase "actions speak louder than words."
There you go. more direct and simple way to say the same thought.
Yeah, I have used that a lot. How do you discern when to rest and when to push through discomfort?
I mean, it's a really hard question. I don't think there's any perfect answer. We could probably talk for 10 hours on this topic and then need some rest. I struggle with it. I can get manic at times, which is part of it. So I can go days without resting. And I know in the back of my mind, like, hey, this is not good for you. But I have learned to kind of ride that wave because sometimes I don't really have a choice. It's a complicated matter, but in general, what I try to do, somebody taught me this once, where if you're making a decision like the one you just posed, flip a coin, because in the air you will be rooting for heads or tails. Meaning, if you say heads, I'm going to rest; tails, I'm going to. Like, you inside, your little inner voice knows the answer, and a quick way to do that is to flip a coin and kind of see what you're rooting for.
I think there's something. I remember, if we look at life choices, we've always got the do nothing. Then you've got the easiest choice, which is stay in your comfort zone, do something you're familiar with, you can do. And then there's the one which really, other end scale, might be doing something which is you're really uncomfortable doing, and you're not sure they'll bring a result, and you're really a bit anxious about doing it. But I think I remember someone saying that obviously the one which you're most uncomfortable doing will probably bring the greatest results. And if you do the most comfortable one, you'll probably not achieve anything because it's staying really in the comfort zone. And I think there's something about sometimes. What points do we do the easy decisions, stay in a comfort zone, and when do we need to step outside and do something uncomfortable but might bring greater results because it's challenging ourselves and getting us in a more challenging situation.
I've thought a lot about that topic, and I would challenge that just a tad. Yeah. In that, like, I don't really believe in that whole get out of your comfort zone thing. Like, I understand the intent of it, and I appreciate the intent, but I've observed that we're really only successful in our comfort zone. So it's not a matter of getting out of our comfort zone. It's a matter of building our comfort zone. Like, you need to build that comfort zone wider. Because I've only succeeded in my comfort zones. Now, I've done uncomfortable things that allow me to put an addition onto my comfort zone, if you will. But it's not a matter of do what's uncomfortable because that's what's good for you. I don't know if that's true. I think there's a time and a place for that. But I also think that, comfort is, we look for comfort. We make decisions every day about what will make us more comfortable. And so I understand the point, but I have found personally that I try to get away from that idea because it just makes me feel guilty when I'm in my comfort zone. When, let's face it, that's where we all want to be. But your point is well taken. I've thought a lot about this, and I had kind of maybe a somewhat contrarian viewpoint that I wanted to share.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I totally understand. I mean, I suppose for me, I lived in my comfort zone for many years and didn't, get to step outside my comfort zone. Then I think for me, I personally, grew as a person and achieved more in many ways when I started taking risks out of my comfort zone. But I understand your point you're making. Definitely. Yeah, I can see what you're saying, and yeah, definitely. So I can understand both sides.
Dr. Gilly, you got anything?
Yeah. I was just thinking, like if you asked me this question just a few weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer. I probably would have said that, it really depends on, again, going back to what's important to you. What are your values? If it's something that's worth it, then you should push yourself through the discomfort, to get to that point. And now I have a little bit more of a lax response because I've learned personally that your body will rebel if you push yourself too hard. And at that point, you feel very helpless because, it's kind of like the body keeps the score, right? But in terms of, your health and sometimes you don't even notice, it's just like a slap. And so I think it's important to also listen to your body and to pace yourself. And so I think slowly, inching through discomfort and then pausing to take a break and then maybe continuing. But learning, I think, how much you can personally take. Like there's individual differences there. So I think there's a balance.
Yeah. I love that you said that because that was me 7 years ago.
Yeah.
My body was pushed beyond the extreme of not just in a physical sense, but also in that mental sense. And I have learned that when my body is saying something, I better listen. Otherwise, I will pay for it, regardless if it's like, no, I can just do this little bit. And my body's like, no, you're not going to. That was Wednesday. I got back from Arizona and I've had this, whatever this is, raspy voice, nasty cough, and like stuffy nose and all the things. And it's like I had a migraine and I'm like, no, I have so much to catch up on. I need to just sit at my desk and I need to work and do all of the things. And I had a coaching call on Wednesday and my coach was like, no, you're going to honor your body and you're going to rest and you're just going to lay low and not do anything. And I was like, aye, Captain. And that was kind of where I was already leaning to. I need to detox my body. I need to do the things and just take a break. And I text my husband and I'm like, you're going to find me in bed, binge watching TV, doing nothing. And that's what I did for a little while. Because it's what my body needed. Too many late nights, a lot of early mornings, and just a constant go, go, go. My body was, like you said, rebelling. So it's paying attention to those signs that our body gives us because it does tell us things. Now, women handle stress differently than what men handle stress, right? So you guys might be able to handle situations that are more stressful on your body and keep pushing through versus resting, right? But us as women, our cortisol levels spike and all sorts of other things wreak havoc on our bodies when we're under stress. So it's something that we need to pay closer attention to and we need to rest more often. But the hard part is society, and we've allowed society to constantly tell us, stay busy, just keep adding, just keep piling, busy, busy, busy. And it's almost like we have to earn our ability to rest when that could be further from the truth. You don't need to check off a box of the to-do list to be able to rest. But we have to get over what our brain is telling us of just stay busy and keep piling it on and remove that thing and then add something else onto it, when we just need to say, that's great, but today I'm going to honor myself and I'm going to take a break. And it doesn't need to be an all-day thing, but it needs to be dedicated time where you are truly resting. Whether you're taking a nap, fine, great, have at it, right? Or you're just like getting into meditation or journaling or prayer or something that's emptying your brain and just allowing you to breathe for a moment and to take a step back. And I think that's harder for women because, again, we have this innate sense that we need to do it all and we need to be it all. But that's not what we're supposed to do. So I often tell people, learn how to delegate. Figure out what you can let go of. Make a list of all the things that are on your plate and what can you delegate to somebody else? What can you say no to that really isn't that important or doesn't align with your values anymore? Get rid of it. It doesn't need to be there. So like delegate, delete, like get things off your plate as best as you possibly can. We are at time. I think this was a great conversation today. Before we end, though, I just want you to give me a quick snapshot, if you will. Like, what would you tell someone who feels like they're stuck right now? They're doing the work, but they're not seeing results. Wrap that up in your final thoughts.
Embrace the suck.
Nice. That.
You didn't say it quick enough.
I'll think of a different one then. So I would say the messy part is chopping down a tree blindfolded, right? Like you know what to do, you just don't know how many swings it's going to take, right? So the only thing you can do is keep at it and know this too shall pass, right?
So for me, just get rid of the could have, should have, and would have, and just concentrate on what you can do.
Love it.
I concur with everybody. Embracing the suck and keep on swinging, my friends. So with that, have a beautiful week and weekend. Next week, we're back. Let me look. We are talking about how to turn unspoken expectations into agreements. Adam has like that email, like really, really itty bitty lettering, and I can hardly see it and read it. So we are back at 8 p.m. UK time next week. Adam will be back next week as well. So we'll see you guys then. Have a great
Thanks.
weekend.
Nice to meet you, Matt.
Yeah, likewise.